In the small town of Pinewood, where everyone knew each other by name, lived Lily Chen. At 32, she had built a simple but meaningful life for herself. Every morning she woke up at 6, made herself a cup of tea and prepared for her day teaching 5-year-olds at Pinewood Elementary. The children adored her gentle nature and endless patience. After school hours, she often stayed behind to help struggling students or prepare creative activities for the next day. Lily lived in a modest 2-bedroom house left to her by her grandparents. The garden was her pride and joy. On weekends, she would spend hours tending to her vegetables and flowers, her hands deep in the soil, face glowing with contentment. Her neighbors would sometimes find fresh tomatoes or zucchini on their doorsteps, little gifts Lily left without wanting recognition. Beyond teaching and gardening, Lily devoted her free time to the Pinewood Community Center. Every Saturday, she taught gardening to local kids and helped elderly residents with their reading and writing. People often asked why she gave away so much of her time. She always answered with a smile, "What else would I do with it?" On this particular Friday, dark clouds had gathered over Pinewood throughout the afternoon. By the time Lily finished grocery shopping at Wilson's Market, rain was pouring down in sheets. She hurried to load her bags into her 12-year-old blue sedan, getting soaked in the process. She didn't mind the rain, though. Her garden needed it after the recent dry spell. The drive home took Lily along Oak Ridge Road, a scenic route that wound through pine forests. The road was nearly empty, with most people already home for dinner. Lily hummed along to an old song on the radio, occasionally wiping fog from the inside of her windshield. About 3 miles from home, through the heavy rain, Lily noticed hazard lights blinking ahead. As she drove closer, she could make out a sleek black car, the kind that rarely appeared in Pinewood, pulled over on the shoulder. The car looked wildly out of place against the rural backdrop, like a panther in a barnyard. Lily slowed down, debating whether to stop. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "Always help folks in trouble. You never know when you'll be the one needing help." She pulled over about 20 feet behind the stranded vehicle, turned on her own hazards, and grabbed her raincoat from the back seat. Stepping out into the downpour, Lily made her way to the black car. It was even more expensive up close, a luxury vehicle with chrome details that gleamed even in the dim light. The driver's door opened as she approached, and a man stepped out, immediately flinching as the rain hit his face. "Car trouble?" Lily called over the sound of falling rain. The man looked up, seemingly surprised to see her. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. His dark hair, now getting damp despite his efforts to shield himself, was perfectly styled, and his leather shoes definitely weren't made for roadside emergencies. "Flat tire," he replied, gesturing to the right front wheel. "And of all days, my phone is dead." Lily approached to take a look. Sure enough, the tire was completely flat. "Looks like you ran over something sharp," she observed, noticing a large nail embedded in the rubber. The man sighed in frustration. "I've never actually changed a tire myself. I usually call roadside assistance. Do you have a spare?" Lily asked. "I think so. In the trunk, probably." Lily couldn't help but smile at his helplessness. "I'm Lily, by the way." "Richard Harrison," he replied, extending his hand before realizing how wet they both were and awkwardly withdrawing it. "Though most people call me Rich." The irony wasn't lost on Lily. Everything about him screamed wealth, from his watch to his perfectly trimmed fingernails. "Well, Rich, let's get you back on the road. Can you open the trunk?" As Rich fumbled with his key fob, Lily took a moment to study him. He wasn't what she expected. Despite his obvious wealth, there was something almost vulnerable about him standing in the rain, looking completely out of his element. The trunk popped open, revealing an immaculate interior with a hidden compartment for the spare tire. Lily efficiently located the tire, jack, and wrench. "Perfect. Now we just need to jack up the car and switch out the tire." Rich watched with genuine curiosity as Lily positioned the jack beneath the car frame. "You seem to know what you're doing," he observed. "My grandfather taught me when I was 16, she explained, working the jack to lift the car. "He said no one should drive without knowing how to handle basic car problems." "Smart man," Rich commented, holding his expensive jacket over his head as a makeshift umbrella. "Here," Lily said, handing him her flashlight. "Make yourself useful and hold this while I work on these lug nuts." Rich took the flashlight, directing it where Lily needed the light. The rain continued to pour, but they had established a strange sort of teamwork. Lily worked methodically, loosening each lug nut with practiced movements. "So," she said, making conversation to distract from the cold rain running down her back. "What brings a fancy car like this to Pinewood? We don't get many visitors, especially not in this weather." Rich hesitated before answering. "Business originally. I was supposed to look at some property about 20 miles from here. But then the skies opened up. My GPS suggested this as a shortcut back to the highway. And now," he gestured to the flat tire. "Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs," Lily replied, removing the last lug nut and carefully setting it aside. "Even to people in expensive suits." Rich laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. "You have no idea. Last week I was in a boardroom in Tokyo, and now I'm standing in the rain on a country road watching a stranger change my tire." "Not a stranger anymore," Lily corrected, removing the flat tire with a grunt of effort. "I'm the woman saving you from spending the night in your car." As Lily fitted the spare tire onto the wheel hub, Rich crouched down beside her, holding the flashlight steady. "You mentioned teaching earlier. What do you teach?" "Kindergarten," Lily replied, starting to secure the lug nuts. 5-year-olds with endless energy and even more questions." "That sounds challenging," Lily smiled as she tightened each nut. "It is. But there's nothing quite like seeing a child's face light up when they finally understand something. Makes all the chaos worthwhile." For a moment, Rich seemed lost in thought. "I can't remember the last time I did something that purely meaningful." The sincerity in his voice made Lily pause and look up at him. Their eyes met briefly before she returned to finishing the job. "Never too late to start," she said softly. With the spare tire secured, Lily lowered the car and packed the tools back into the trunk. Her clothes were soaked through, hair plastered to her face, but there was satisfaction in completing the task. "You're all set," she announced, closing the trunk. "The spare will get you to the nearest town with a garage, but don't drive too fast on it." Rich stood awkwardly by the driver's door, fishing something from his pocket. "I can't thank you enough," he said, pulling out his wallet. "Please, let me compensate you for your time and getting soaked." Lily shook her head firmly, water droplets flying from her hair. "Put that away. Helping someone doesn't come with a price tag. But no buts. In Pinewood, we help each other out. That's just how it works." She started walking back to her own car. "Wait," Rich called after her. "At least let me get your number, in case I ever find myself stranded in Pinewood again." Lily turned, walking backward for a few steps. "Small town, remember? Anyone at Wilson's Market can point you my way." With that, she gave him a small wave and hurried back to her car. As she settled into her driver's seat, Lily caught sight of Rich in her rearview mirror. He stood in the rain for a moment longer, looking after her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then he shook his head as if clearing a thought and got back into his car. Lily turned her key in the ignition, her old sedan rumbling to life. As she pulled back onto the road, she thought about the strange encounter. Rich Harrison was clearly from a different world, one of boardrooms and business deals and expensive cars. Yet for a brief moment in the rain, they had connected as simply two people, one who needed help and one who could provide it. Little did she know that the simple gold and sapphire ring that had belonged to her grandmother, the one she twisted absently around her finger as she drove, would soon connect their worlds in ways she could never imagine. For now, though, Lily was simply thinking about a hot shower, dry clothes, and the vegetable soup she planned to make with her fresh groceries. The encounter with the millionaire was just another story to tell her kindergartners on Monday, about helping strangers in the rain. The rain had lessened to a gentle drizzle by the time Lily finished changing Richard's tire. Her jeans were soaked through, hair dripping, but there was satisfaction in a job well done. As she tightened the last lug nut and stood up, wiping her muddy hands on her already dirty raincoat, Richard held out a pristine handkerchief from his breast pocket. "Please take it," he insisted when she hesitated. "It's the least I can do." Lily accepted it with a small nod and began cleaning her hands. That's when it happened, the moment that would change everything. As she wiped away the mud from her fingers, her grandmother's ring caught the beam from Richard's flashlight. The sapphire stone gleamed deep blue against the gold setting, its surrounding tiny diamonds sparkling like stars around a midnight moon. Richard's breath caught audibly, The polite smile on his face vanished, replaced by an expression Lily couldn't quite read, something between shock and disbelief. He stepped closer, eyes fixed on her hand. "That ring," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse. May I see it?" Lily instinctively closed her hand, caught off guard by his intense focus. "It's just an old family piece," she said, feeling strangely protective. "My grandmother's." Richard seemed to realize his reaction had alarmed her. He took a step back, composing himself. "I'm sorry. It reminded me of something." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the soft patter of raindrops on leaves and the distant rumble of thunder. Richard kept glancing at her hand, then looking away as if fighting the urge to stare. "Well," Lily said finally, handing back his now dirty handkerchief. "You should be all set to drive. Remember, don't go too fast on that spare." Richard nodded distractedly, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Thank you again for your help, Lily." He reached for his wallet once more. "Please, I insist on compensating you." "And I insist on refusing," she replied firmly. "Good luck getting back to the city." As Lily turned to walk to her car, Richard called after her. "Wait, which way to town? I should probably get this tire fixed before heading back to the city. Follow this road about 3 miles. Jackson's auto shop should still be open. Tell Pete that Lily sent you." She smiled. "He won't overcharge you too much." Richard's eyes flickered once more to her hand. "Thank you. Perhaps I'll see you around town while I'm waiting for the repair." "Perhaps," Lily replied, though she doubted their paths would cross again. Men like Richard Harrison didn't linger in towns like Pinewood. Back in her car, heating blasting to chase away the chill, Lily found herself looking at her grandmother's ring. She'd worn it every day since her mother had passed it down to her on her 25th birthday. It had never drawn attention before, certainly not the kind of intense interest Richard had shown. The ring was beautiful, yes, but in a subtle, old-fashioned way. The sapphire wasn't particularly large, though its color was remarkably deep. The setting was intricate, with tiny vines etched into the gold band that wrapped around the stones. Lily had always loved it for the connection it gave her to her grandmother, a woman she'd only known through her mother's stories. She twisted it absently as she drove the remaining miles home, thinking about the strange encounter. By the time she pulled into her driveway, she had mostly dismissed Richard's reaction as a coincidence. Perhaps he'd once bought a similar ring for someone special. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the previous day's storm had never happened. Lily spent the early hours in her garden, assessing any damage from the rain and harvesting vegetables for her weekly donation to the community center's food pantry. She was kneeling in the dirt, carefully picking green beans when a car pulled up outside her gate. Not just any car, the same sleek black luxury vehicle from yesterday, now sporting a new tire. Lily stood, brushing soil from her knees as Richard Harrison stepped out of the driver's seat. He'd traded yesterday's soaked business suit for dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Despite the casual clothes, he still looked distinctly out of place among her tomato plants and sunflowers. "Good morning," he called, remaining by the gate until she waved him in. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Pete at the auto shop pointed me to your house." Lily picked up her basket of vegetables. "Pete's never been one for customer privacy," she said with a wry smile. "What brings you back to Pinewood? I thought you'd be halfway to the city by now." Richard ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that seemed at odds with his confident appearance. "They needed to order a new tire for my model. Won't arrive until Monday." He glanced around her garden. "This is impressive. You grew all this yourself?" "Every tomato and cucumber," Lily confirmed, leading him toward her porch. "Would you like some iced tea? It's getting hot out here." Richard accepted gratefully, following her to the small wooden porch where 2 rocking chairs faced the garden. While Lily went inside to get drinks, he studied the modest house with its weathered blue shutters and pots of flowers lining the steps. When she returned with 2 glasses, he was examining a wind chime made from old spoons and forks that hung from the porch roof. "Did you make this?" "My students did as an end-of-year gift." She handed him a glass. "The kindergartners thought I needed pretty music for my garden." They sat in the rocking chairs, an unexpected moment of peace in the morning sunshine. Lily couldn't help wondering why this wealthy stranger had sought her out. She didn't have to wonder long. "I wanted to thank you properly for your help yesterday." Richard said after taking a sip of tea. "And I have a question about your ring." Lily instinctively touched the sapphire with her thumb. "My ring?" Richard set his glass down carefully. "Lily, this might sound strange, but that ring, it looks exactly like a family heirloom that belonged to my grandmother, one that disappeared 15 years ago." The directness of his statement caught her off guard. "That's impossible. This was my grandmother's ring. My mother gave it to me. May I see it, please?" His tone was gentle but insistent. Hesitantly, Lily slipped the ring from her finger and handed it to him. Richard examined it with careful fingers, turning it in the sunlight. His face grew more serious with each moment. "There's an inscription inside," he said. 3 tiny words. Lily nodded slowly. "Love beyond measure." Richard closed his eyes briefly as if steadying himself. "This is my grandmother's ring, Lily. I'd know it anywhere. She wore it for 50 years. The sapphire came from Burma, incredibly rare. The setting was custom designed by my grandfather in 1953. "That can't be right," Lily protested, taking the ring back defensively. "My grandmother left this to my mother. She'd had it for years." "How did your grandmother get it?" Richard asked quietly. The question made Lily pause. She'd never actually asked about the ring's origins. It had simply always been there, on her grandmother's hand, then her mother's, and now hers. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "My mother passed away 3 years ago, and my grandmother died when I was very young." Richard leaned forward in his chair. "Lily, I'm not accusing you of anything, but this ring means a great deal to my family. We've been searching for it since my grandmother died 15 years ago. It simply vanished from her belongings at Golden Pines nursing home." Lily's stomach dropped. "Golden Pines? In Maplewood?" Richard nodded, watching her reaction carefully. "My mother worked there as a nurse for nearly 20 years, Lily said softly, pieces falling into place. She would have been there 15 years ago. A heavy silence settled between them. The cheerful sound of birds and the gentle creaking of the rocking chairs seemed suddenly inappropriate for the weight of the moment. "Did your mother ever mention a patient named Catherine Harrison?" Richard finally asked. Lily shook her head slowly, then stopped. "Wait, KDH. My mother sometimes talked about a patient she was especially fond of, an elderly woman whose family rarely visited. She called her KDH. Richard's expression softened with something like pain. "That would be her. My grandmother preferred Katie to Catherine, said it made her feel younger." He smiled sadly. "And she was right about the family not visiting enough. My parents traveled constantly, and I was away at college, then starting my career overseas." Lily looked down at the ring in her palm, seeing it differently now. Not just as her family heirloom, but potentially as someone else's lost treasure. "I don't understand," she said finally. "If this is your grandmother's ring, why would my mother have it?" Richard shook his head. "I don't know, but I intend to find out. There must be records at Golden Pines, or perhaps your mother kept journals. Letters?" The implication hung in the air between them, that Lily's mother might have taken something that wasn't hers. The thought made her chest tighten with defensiveness. "My mother was the most honest person I've ever known," Lily said firmly. "If she had this ring, there must be an explanation." Richard held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I believe you, and I want to understand what happened as much as you do." He paused, studying her face. "Will you help me figure this out? For both our families' sakes?" Lily looked down at the ring that had always represented her family's legacy. Now it was a mystery connecting her to this stranger from another world. The right thing to do was clear, even if it meant potentially losing something precious. "Yes," she said finally, "let's find the truth." Neither of them realized then how that simple agreement would change both their lives, or that the truth about the ring would be far more complicated, and far more beautiful than either of them imagined. Sunday morning arrived with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of Lily's blooming roses through her open windows. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions about the ring she'd worn for years without ever questioning its history. Now it sat on her bedside table, catching the early morning light, beautiful and suddenly mysterious. She picked it up, turning it over in her palm. "Love beyond measure." The inscription that had always seemed like a lovely sentiment now felt like a clue to a story she didn't know. By 8 o'clock, Lily was in her attic, pulling out dusty boxes of her mother's belongings. She hadn't gone through everything after her mother's passing. Some memories had been too painful to revisit. Now she had a purpose that pushed her past that hesitation. The doorbell rang just as she was carrying a third box down to her living room. Richard stood on her porch carrying 2 coffee cups and a paper bag that smelled of fresh pastries. "I thought you might need breakfast," he said, lifting the offerings with an uncertain smile, "and I wanted to see if you'd found anything." Lily stepped aside to let him in, surprised at how quickly they'd fallen into a kind of partnership. "I've just started looking through Mom's things," she said, leading him to the living room where boxes now covered her small couch. "I didn't sleep much." "Neither did I," Richard admitted, setting their breakfast on the coffee table. He looked different today, more approachable in casual clothes, his hair slightly rumpled as if he'd run his fingers through it repeatedly. "I called my family's lawyer last night. He's sending me all the documents related to my grandmother's estate, including the insurance claim for the missing ring." They settled into an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm, sipping coffee and taking turns looking through photographs, letters, and mementos. Richard handled each item with careful respect, seeming to understand that these weren't just objects to Lily. "Your mother looks kind," he commented, studying a photograph of Lily's mother in her nursing uniform, arm around an elderly patient who was smiling widely. "My grandmother always responded better to kind people." Lily smiled softly. "Mom could get through to anyone. She had a special touch with the patients everyone else found difficult." Around midday, as they were starting to lose hope of finding anything conclusive, Richard pulled a small leather-bound book from the bottom of a box. "Is this a diary?" Lily took it from him carefully. "Mom's journal from when she worked at Golden Pines. She kept one every year." She hesitated before opening it. "This feels like invading her privacy." Richard nodded understandingly. "We don't have to read personal entries. Maybe just look for mentions of my grandmother?" The journal covered the year Richard's grandmother would have been at Golden Pines. With gentle fingers, Lily turned pages filled with her mother's neat handwriting. Skimming for mentions of Katie H., they found the first entry from April. "Katie H. arrived today. Family seems wealthy but distant. She's sharp as a tack and doesn't miss a thing. Told me straight away that she hates being called Mrs. Harrison because it reminds her of being a society wife for 50 years. Says she's finally free to just be Katie." Richard smiled sadly. "That sounds exactly like her." They continued through the journal, finding regular mentions of Katie. Lily's mother had clearly developed a special bond with Richard's grandmother. There were notes about their conversations, Katie's health challenges, and the stories she'd tell about her younger days. Then, in early December, they found what they were looking for. "Katie called me to her room today. She was having a good day, clear-eyed and sitting up in bed. She took off her sapphire ring, the one she never removes, and pressed it into my hand. I tried to refuse, told her it was clearly valuable and her family would want it. She just laughed and said, 'That's exactly why I want you to have it. They care about its value. You care about me.' When I still hesitated, she told me the story of how her husband gave it to her on their first anniversary. 'Love beyond measure,' he'd told her, words now etched inside the band. She made me promise to keep it and someday give it to someone who understands that people are worth more than possessions." I couldn't say no to her. Lily looked up from the journal to find Richard's eyes glistening with unshed tears. He cleared his throat before speaking. She gave it away, willingly. "Mom wasn't a thief," Lily said softly, feeling a weight lift from her chest. She tried to refuse. Richard rubbed a hand across his face. "All these years we thought the ring had been stolen. The insurance company investigated the nursing staff. We even hired private detectives." He shook his head. "Meanwhile, my grandmother had simply given it to someone she cared about." Lily gently closed the journal. "Your grandmother must have valued her relationship with my mother very much. While her actual family was nowhere to be found," Richard added bitterly. "We were always too busy. Dad was building the business, Mom was managing their social life, and I was focused on my career overseas." His voice grew quiet. "I only visited her 3 times that whole year." The admission hung in the air between them. Lily reached out impulsively and squeezed his hand. "She had my mother. She wasn't alone." Richard's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He checked the screen and sighed. The lawyer sent those documents. He scrolled through his phone, then stopped suddenly. "There's something here you should see." He handed Lily his phone, showing an email with an attached image, a handwritten note on elegant stationery. To whom it may concern, it read. If my sapphire ring is missing from my possessions after my passing, please know that I have given it away by my own choice to someone who has shown me true kindness. Do not search for it. Do not accuse anyone. The ring has found its rightful home with someone who understands its real value. Not the diamonds or the sapphire, but the love it represents. Let it be. With all my love, Catherine Katie Harrison. She tried to tell us, Richard said quietly, but this note was found among her papers after the ring was already reported missing. The family assumed it was forged by whoever took the ring. Lily handed back his phone, overwhelmed by the implications. So what happens now? She asked, glancing at the ring that sat between them on the coffee table. Richard was silent for a long moment, studying the ring that had belonged to his grandmother. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. It belongs to you, Lily. My grandmother wanted your mother to have it, and your mother wanted you to have it. I won't go against their wishes. But it's your family heirloom, Lily protested. It must be worth— I know exactly what it's worth, Richard interrupted gently, both in dollars and in family history. But my grandmother was right. Our family had forgotten what it truly represented. He smiled sadly. We saw it as an asset, something to insure and lock away. She wanted it to be worn by someone who understood love beyond measure. The afternoon sun slanted through Lily's windows, casting warm light across the scattered memories of her mother's life. Outside, birds called to each other in the garden, and somewhere down the street children laughed as they played. Life continued its simple rhythm in Pinewood while Lily and Richard sat surrounded by the past. I should get back to checking on that tire, Richard said finally, standing up. The shop might have news. Lily walked him to the door, the ring still clutched in her hand. At the threshold, Richard paused. Would you have dinner with me tonight? There's more I'd like to know about your mother and her time with my grandmother. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. An acknowledgement that this strange connection through a sapphire ring had changed something for both of them. I'd like that, Lily said simply. As she watched Richard walk to his car, Lily slipped the ring back onto her finger. It felt different now, weighted with new meaning. The ring had traveled from Catherine Harrison's hand to her mother's, and now to hers. A journey guided by love and kindness, rather than bloodlines or inheritance. What neither Lily nor Richard yet realized was that their own journey was just beginning. The only restaurant in Pinewood that could be considered fancy was the Willow Tree, a converted Victorian house at the edge of town. When Richard suggested dinner, Lily had assumed they'd go there. Instead, he asked if she would show him her favorite local spot, somewhere meaningful to her, not impressive to others. That's how they ended up at Mabel's Kitchen, a small family-owned diner that had been serving comfort food in Pinewood for 40 years. The vinyl booths were worn but clean, the walls covered with local high school sports trophies and faded photographs of town events. The elderly owner, Mabel herself, greeted Lily with a warm hug before eyeing Richard with undisguised curiosity. Who's your friend? She asked Lily, not bothering to lower her voice. This is Richard, Lily replied, hiding a smile. He's visiting Pinewood for a few days. Mabel led them to a corner booth, her shrewd eyes taking in Richard's expensive watch and perfectly tailored casual clothes. You're not from around here, she stated rather than asked. Richard smiled easily. Is it that obvious? You look like you've never eaten a proper slice of pie in your life, Mabel declared, handing them menus. Too skinny by half. After she shuffled away, Richard leaned across the table. I think I've just been insulted and diagnosed in the same sentence. Lily laughed. That's Mabel's version of a welcome. Trust me, by the end of the meal, she'll be trying to adopt you. They ordered Mabel's famous meatloaf and mashed potatoes on Lily's recommendation. As they waited for their food, the conversation turned back to their families and the ring that connected them. I've been thinking about my grandmother all day, Richard admitted, turning his water glass slowly. I realize now how little I actually knew her. To me, she was always just Grandmother Harrison, proper, traditional, someone who sent birthday checks and expected thank you notes. Tell me about her, Lily prompted. What do you remember? Richard's eyes grew distant. She always smelled like lavender, and she had this laugh, unexpected from such a proper lady, big and full like she was surprised by joy. He smiled at the memory. When I was very young, before my grandfather died, they would visit for Christmas. She would sneak into my room after my parents thought I was asleep and read me stories. Not from books, but stories she made up about her childhood on a farm in Vermont. She grew up on a farm? Lily asked, surprised. Richard nodded. Before she married into the Harrison family fortune. My grandfather met her while he was on a hunting trip. Family legend says he took one look at her and canceled the rest of his trip to court her. Their food arrived, steam rising from generous portions. Richard took a bite and his eyes widened. "This is incredible." "Told you," Lily said, smiling. Mabel doesn't believe in small portions or subtle flavors. As they ate, Richard continued sharing memories of his grandmother. Memories that seemed to surprise even him as he recalled them. "After my grandfather died, she changed. Or maybe my parents changed how they treated her. She became less a person and more a responsibility, something to manage along with the family trust and properties." Lily thought of her own grandmother, who had lived with them until she died. "In my family, grandparents were treasures. Mom always said old people carry our history and their memories." "Your mother sounds wise," Richard said softly. "No wonder my grandmother was drawn to her." Lily twirled her fork in the mashed potatoes, considering her next words carefully. "Can I ask you something personal?" Richard nodded. "What do you do?" "I know you're successful. The car alone tells me that." "But what's your actual job?" "I run Harrison Capital," he replied. "My grandfather started it as an investment firm. My father expanded it into technology ventures and real estate. I've taken it further into international markets." He hesitated. "It sounds impressive. But mostly I attend meetings, review reports, and make decisions about money that could change people's lives without ever meeting them." There was something in his tone, a detachment or perhaps dissatisfaction, that caught Lily's attention. "Do you enjoy it?" Richard looked startled by the question. "I'm good at it," he answered, which wasn't really an answer at all. "It's what I was raised to do." "That's not what I asked," Lily said gently. Their eyes met across the table, and Richard seemed to really see her for the first time, not just as the woman with his grandmother's ring, but as someone who asked questions others in his life never bothered with. Sometimes, he finally admitted, when a project creates jobs or revitalizes a struggling business, but more often it's just empty. Numbers changing on spreadsheets, wealth growing for people who already have plenty. He shook his head. "I've never said that out loud before." "What would you do if you weren't running Harrison Capital?" Lily asked. Richard laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I have no idea. It's all I've ever done." He turned the question back to her. "What about you? Did you always want to be a teacher?" "Not always," Lily confessed. "I wanted to be a botanist. I was studying plant sciences in college when Mom got sick. I came home to care for her and never went back to finish my degree. The kindergarten position opened up and it turned out I loved teaching children. Do you regret not finishing?" Lily considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I wonder what might have been. But I don't regret the choice. Being there for Mom in her final years gave me memories I'll treasure forever." Their conversation was interrupted by Mabel bringing 2 enormous slices of apple pie a la mode. "On the house," she declared. "You two need some sweetness in your lives." As they ate the still warm pie, Richard glanced around the diner. Most tables were filled with local families and couples. The atmosphere was lively but comfortable, people who knew each other sharing meals and stories. "I can't remember the last time I ate in a place like this," he confessed. "In my world, restaurants are about being seen or making business connections. And how's our little diner measuring up?" Lily asked with a smile. "Best meal I've had in years," Richard said, and the simple honesty in his voice made Lily's heart skip a beat. After dinner, they walked through the town square where century-old oak trees were strung with year-round fairy lights. The evening was mild, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They found a bench facing the small-town fountain where local children often threw pennies for wishes. "I have a confession," Richard said as they sat down. "I wasn't entirely truthful earlier." Lily turned to him, eyebrows raised. "The repair shop fixed my tire this afternoon. I could have left for the city today." "Oh," Lily said, trying to hide her surprise. "So why did you stay?" Richard looked at her directly. "Because for the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm having conversations that matter. Learning things about my family and myself that I never knew." He paused. "And because I wanted to spend more time with you." The honesty in his voice made any clever response impossible. Lily simply nodded, acknowledging the truth of his words. "Tomorrow I have to return to the city," Richard continued. "There's a board meeting I can't miss, but I'd like to come back next weekend if that's all right with you." "I'd like that," Lily said softly. She found herself touching the ring on her finger, the connection between them that had started this unlikely friendship. As if following her thoughts, Richard asked, "May I see the ring again?" "Not because I want to take it," he added quickly. "I just want to look at it differently now that I know its story." Lily slipped the ring off and placed it in his palm. Richard turned it carefully, watching how the sapphire caught the light from the nearby street lamp. "My grandfather had this made specially for her," he said. The sapphire reminded him of her eyes. The diamonds were meant to be the stars the night they met. He told me once that when he gave it to her, she cried and said it was too beautiful to wear every day. He told her, "Love is an everyday thing. Why shouldn't beautiful things be worn every day?" He handed the ring back to Lily, but didn't immediately let go when she took it, their fingers touching. "My grandmother understood something I'm only beginning to learn," he said quietly. "That objects only have the meaning we give them. This ring's true value isn't in the stones or gold, but in the love it carried from my grandfather to my grandmother, from her to your mother, and from your mother to you." When Lily slipped the ring back on her finger, it felt different, like it now carried not just her family's history, but a bridge between her world and Richard's. As they walked back toward her house in the soft evening light, their hands occasionally brushing, Lily realized that something unexpected was happening. Two people from completely different worlds had found a connection through a simple twist of fate, a flat tire on a rainy evening and a sapphire ring that had traveled an unlikely path to bring them together. What neither of them yet knew was how much more the ring still had to teach them both. 3 months had passed since that rainy evening when Lily had changed Richard's tire on the side of the road. Summer had given way to autumn, painting pine wood in shades of gold and crimson. The weekends had become a precious rhythm in their lives. Richard driving from the city every Friday evening and returning late Sunday, the time between filled with simple pleasures that had once seemed foreign to him. On this particular October Saturday, Lily was kneeling in the community garden, helping her kindergarten students plant bulbs that would bloom in spring. Tiny hands patted soil over dormant tulips and daffodils, their owners chattering excitedly about the flowers they would never see until after the school year ended. "Miss Chen, will my flower remember me?" 5-year-old Tommy asked, his forehead wrinkled with concern. Lily smiled. "The flower might not remember your name, but it will remember your kindness. Every time you plant something with love, that care stays in the earth." From the garden fence, Richard watched the exchange, a gentle smile warming his face. He had arrived early, expecting to find Lily at home, and a neighbor had directed him to the community garden instead. Now he stood quietly observing as she moved among the children, patient and attentive to each one. When the planting session ended and parents arrived to collect their children, Richard helped Lily gather trowels and watering cans. Her face lit up when she spotted him, but she finished thanking each child and parent before making her way to his side. "You're early," she said, reaching up to brush a leaf from his shoulder. "I thought you had meetings until noon." "I delegated," Richard replied, taking the garden tools from her hands. "It seems I've been learning a lot from a certain kindergarten teacher about what deserves my time and what doesn't." They walked back toward Lily's house, the autumn breeze rustling leaves around their feet. In the 3 months since they'd met, subtle changes had reshaped Richard's appearance. His expensive clothes remained, but his posture had relaxed. The permanent furrow between his eyebrows had smoothed. He laughed more easily now, and the laugh reached his eyes. "I have news," he said as they reached Lily's front porch. 2 pieces, actually. Inside, as Lily made tea in her small kitchen, Richard paced the living room, uncharacteristically nervous. When they settled on the couch with steaming mugs, he took a deep breath. "First, I've established the Katherine Harrison Foundation," he announced. "It's funded with $10 million to start, dedicated to supporting elder care and community programs that connect generations." Lily's eyes widened. "Richard, that's incredible. The first grant is going to Golden Pines Nursing Home," he continued. "They're creating a garden space where residents and local children can work together. The second is for Pinewood Elementary's after-school program." Lily set down her tea, overwhelmed. The school has been trying to fund that program for years. Richard nodded. I know, your principal was quite surprised to get my call. He took her hand. This is just the beginning. I want the foundation to honor what my grandmother valued, not wealth or status, but connection and kindness. She would be so proud, Lily said softly. And what's your second piece of news? Richard's expression shifted, becoming more serious. I'm stepping down as CEO of Harrison Capital. What? Lily gasped. But your family business will continue under new leadership, Richard finished. I'm remaining on the board, but I've hired a CEO who shares my vision for more ethical investing. I want to focus on the foundation and, he hesitated, other priorities. The weight of his decision hung in the air between them. It was no small thing for a man like Richard Harrison to step away from the position that had defined his life and family legacy for generations. Are you sure this is what you want? Lily asked. Richard's gaze was steady. I've never been more certain of anything. These past months have changed me, Lily. Coming here, spending time with you, learning what actually matters, it's like waking up from a long sleep. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Which brings me to why I came early today. Lily's heart stuttered as Richard opened the box. Inside wasn't a ring, as she had momentarily feared and hoped, but a delicate gold key. This is the key to my grandmother's farmhouse in Vermont, he explained. The family has owned it for decades but barely visited. I had it renovated and the gardens restored. His eyes searched hers. It's where she grew up, the life she had before she married into wealth. I thought, maybe we could go there together. See if it feels like a place where new memories could be made. The invitation hung between them, not quite a proposal, but something significant nonetheless. A direction, a future to explore together. Lily touched the key gently. I'd love to see it. The next weekend found them driving through the Vermont countryside where autumn had transformed the landscape into a blaze of color. After several hours on increasingly narrow roads, they turned onto a gravel driveway lined with ancient maple trees. The farmhouse that appeared around the final curve took Lily's breath away. It was exactly what a Vermont farmhouse should be. White clapboard with dark green shutters, a wide front porch with rocking chairs, and gardens that, though prepared for winter now, promised abundance in spring and summer. It's beautiful, she whispered as Richard parked the car. Inside, the house balanced preservation with comfort. Original hardwood floors and beams remained, but the kitchen had been thoughtfully modernized. Photographs lined the walls, not just of the Harrison family, but of the farm's history. The people who had worked the land, and most prominently, Catherine Harrison as a young woman, laughing on the porch. Richard watched nervously as Lily explored. The town is just 3 miles away. They have a school that might need a teacher who understands plants and children. His voice was carefully casual, but his eyes were earnest. Or if you wanted to finish your botany degree, there's a university within commuting distance. Lily turned to him, understanding all that he wasn't quite saying. You've thought about this a lot. I have, he admitted. Too much? Too soon? She shook her head, moving to take his hands. Not too much. Maybe a little soon for decisions, but not too soon to dream about possibilities. They spent the weekend exploring the farm and nearby town. Richard showed Lily the apple orchard where his grandmother had played as a child, the stream where she'd caught frogs, the attic bedroom with sloped ceilings where she'd slept beneath handmade quilts. On Sunday afternoon, they sat on a hillside overlooking the property. The autumn sun cast long shadows across fields that had once fed a family, then been left dormant for years. I'm thinking about turning some of the land into a teaching garden, Richard said, picking up a fallen leaf and twirling it between his fingers. A place where children can learn about growing food like you teach your students in Pinewood. You'd be good at that, Lily said, and meant it. She'd seen him with her kindergarteners, his natural patience and thoughtfulness winning them over completely. Richard reached for her hand, his fingers finding the sapphire ring she still wore. I've been thinking about what my grandmother did, giving this ring to your mother. For years I saw it as a loss to our family. Now I understand it was the opposite. It was the beginning of a connection that would eventually save me from becoming exactly what she feared, someone who valued things over people. Lily squeezed his hand. She couldn't have known what would happen, couldn't she? Richard smiled. I wonder. She was always the cleverest one in the family. He looked down at their intertwined fingers at the sapphire that caught the afternoon light. Love beyond measure. My grandfather's words to her, her gift to your mother's legacy to you. And now? Lily asked softly. Now it's brought me to you, Richard said simply. Whatever happens between us, whether this becomes our home someday or just a place we visited once, I'll always be grateful. For that rainy evening when my tire went flat outside, Pinewood, as the sun began to set, painting the Vermont sky in shades of pink and gold, Lily rested her head on Richard's shoulder. The sapphire ring on her finger glinted in the fading light, carrying within its blue depths the stories of those who had worn it before, stories of love given freely, without measurement or condition. What had begun with a simple act of kindness, a small-town teacher helping a stranded millionaire, had evolved into something neither could have imagined. Two people from different worlds, connected by a ring that had found its way from one hand to another, guided by the wisdom of a grandmother who understood that the truest inheritance isn't wealth or possessions, but the capacity to recognize what truly matters. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared above the farmhouse that might someday be their home, Lily and Richard walked hand in hand back toward the warm lights of the porch, following a path first traveled long ago by a farm girl, who would one day wear a sapphire ring given with love beyond measure.